What if childhood didn't exist in the Middle Ages? Like at all. No fun. No games. No being kids. In 1960, that's exactly what the great French medieval historian Phillippe Ariès concluded. That childhood as we know it did not exist in the Middle Ages. It's not to say that there weren't children, but that the concept of childhood wasn't there. When we think about childhood, we think of a time of innocence, a time of reduced responsibility. Medieval European children, according to Ariès, were not treated that much differently from adults. The heart of his thesis was that childhood is a modern invention. Medieval children were expected to learn and take on responsibilities as soon as they were physically or intellectually capable. Childhood was not sentimentalized. Childhood was not devoted to play or even understood as a distinct period of life. So was he right? Was there no such thing as medieval childhood? Let's find out. So why did Ariès think that childhood didn't exist? One reason, according to him, was the high childhood mortality rate. Ariès argued that medieval childhood was so dangerous and infant mortality was so high, medieval parents could not afford to attach the same sense of sentimentality to childhood that later ages would. On the element of death, Ariès was correct. Some historians suggest that children really only had about a 50% chance of surviving to adulthood. In an era before antibiotics, vaccines, modern sanitation, or medicine, death could come in many ways. Children got sick and died all the time. Accidents took many more. A broken bone or a cut could easily lead to infection and death. Given this reality, medieval parents, according to Ariès, could not allow themselves to become too attached to children who might die at any time. According to Ariès, it was the slow decline of childhood mortality during the early modern period which led to a rise in attention and love paid to children and the birth of a culture of childhood. Much of Ariès' argument also rests on his analysis of medieval art and its depiction of children. Children, he noted, rarely appear by themselves in portraits until the 16th century, and very often when children are depicted, they seem like, well, little ugly adults. Take this painting of Mary and baby Jesus from the 13th century. Jesus seems to be a balding middle-aged man baby. Or this one. Or this one. Ariès argued that the shift towards sentimentalizing childhood can be detected through art, in particular through paintings of baby Jesus and Mary, whom he sees as being depicted increasingly like a real baby over time. Thus, Ariès concluded that medieval children were really just little adults, expected to work as soon as they were able and learn to live in medieval society. In short, children did not have time to be children. So no fun and no childhood. For a long time, Ariès' theories held sway, and the Middle Ages continued to earn its reputation for cruelty. Then, in 1993, an American historian named Barbara Hanawalt would find evidence that would change everything. She would single-handedly overturn Ariès and prove that not only did a childhood exist in the Middle Ages, but that it wasn't that much different from our own. So how'd she do it? Hanawalt's proof came from a type of source that one would not normally think about when you're looking for evidence of childhood: medieval coroner's reports. That's another way of saying death report. Medieval coroners worked similar to modern coroners. When someone died, a coroner would investigate and file a report. Dating from at least the 13th century onward, large numbers of these reports survive from England. So what on earth can a death report tell us about childhood? Well, for one thing, there are plenty of reports discussing the death of children, and every once in a while, the coroner would also note how they died. And what were they doing? Most often, they were playing. For example, one report read that a little girl, who was aged 4, was drowned as she was playing with a duck and trying to put it into the river. In a 15th century report, 3-year-old Beatrice Shirley of Winston, Sussex, was crushed while playing with other small children under a stack of wood. Hanawalt found that for children under the age of 6,
60% of all accidents involved play, such as playing with balls, trying to get a ball or a feather out of a body of water, or climbing trees. In other words, kids being kids, having a childhood. As children got older, the amount of time that they spent at play was reduced. Between the ages of 7 to 12, the proportion of deaths associated with play drops to 24%. We begin to see death while doing chores. For girls, we see accidents involving cooking, gathering food, or drawing water. For boys, we see accidents outdoors with other men working. But while there is still a growing association with work, children are still playing. They're still being kids. And really, if you look, there is evidence for medieval childhood all over the place. While it's true that pictures depicting children playing are few, but they do appear from the year 1200 onward. Here are two boys whipping a top from a 14th century psalter in the British Library. Here's another example from 1338 of children playing on a swing. Here we have some children watching a puppet show from the mid-14th century. And here's another 15th century image of a king playing with his children who have toy lances and hobby horses. It's not to say that there weren't differences between medieval childhood and today. For one thing, children drank a lot of beer in the Middle Ages, but that's a video for another day. The real difference between the average Western child today and one from the Middle Ages began after the age of 12 and the beginning of adolescence. Coming up in a future video, we'll explore what it was like to be a teenager in the Middle Ages, and spoiler alert, it was very different. The story of medieval childhood and Barbara Hanawalt's remarkable study reminds us that real history can be found in the most unlikely of places. If you're interested in reading or purchasing Professor Hanawalt's book, which I completely recommend, it's a great read filled with lots of really interesting anecdotes and stories from those coroner's reports, I've included a link below. If you've enjoyed this video, why not consider subscribing to the channel and check out some of my other content here. If there's a question that you want answered about the Middle Ages, let me know in the comments below. Until next time, on The Medieval Historian.